Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. Darren Mitchell here, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to speak to another Aussie, although he's not in Australia right now. He's north of Australia, 2 hours behind. Mr. Daniel Tolson coming in from Taiwan. How are you, my friend?
Well, I better do my best Aussie accent today. G'day, I'm fantastic. I've still got the Aussie accent after living out of the country for almost 23 years. So,
and you were saying before that you
I think Ryan Tuckwood said it on your podcast as well. He sounded like Prince Charles. I just want to sound like Mick Dundee.
A little bit. I was going to say, when you're out of the country and you're liaising back into the country after a while, does it sound, when you hear that Australian accent again, do you think, wow, do we actually really sound like that?
My kids, my daughter's going to be 12 soon, my boy's 7.5, and I look at them and I say, gee, you're bogan. You're so bogan. I said, but you got to remember your dad grew up in Penrith. Yes. So I kind of expect that from them. When I go back, it takes me a little bit of time to adjust to the speed of the conversations.
Okay.
My business is based here, but I'm always operating with Australians, so I'm used to it. But once I get into a group of people, I've really got to catch up on all the lingo. Yeah. So the brain still processes like an Aussie, but the language pickup just gets slower over the years.
Awesome. So Daniel, very much looking forward to this. We've had a pretty good conversation before, and we've been connected on LinkedIn for a little while. And you're a business consultant at the Tolson Institute, aptly named after yourself, which is fantastic. But you've also got a very big and long established history in business, been a business coach, you've been in real estate, you've been with Emirates as a cabin crew, leading teams flying all over the world. So I'm sure you've got lots and lots of lessons and lots of stories, but you're also pretty well renowned around emotional intelligence and how we can build better levels of emotional intelligence to become better leaders. And I love what's on your LinkedIn profile. And what really intrigued me about this is become a better leader in 90 seconds. So literally being able to walk into a room and become a better leader or read people with 90 seconds. So this is going to be an interesting conversation because I'm really intrigued about this because we've both got backgrounds in NLP. And I'm also very, very big in EQ as well. So just for the listeners' benefit, love for you to just give a little bit of a background in terms of your career and what's led you to do what you're doing today.
My first career was in sales, and I was a paper boy. And I got the 3-step sales process. The training, it took all of 60 seconds. There's your newspapers. There's the door, go make sales. And I thought selling was going to be that easy. I really thought that I'd just be able to walk into any shop and make a sale. And I remember leaving my uncle's news agency, and it was called O'Brien's News Agency. And literally you leave the news agency and there's the butcher and the baker. So I went to the baker and I asked him, do you want to buy a newspaper? And he just looked at me and said, I don't read English. Now, talking about NLP and sensory acuity, he was a Vietnamese baker and probably didn't read English at all. And I was like, oh my gosh, like something that's so important. It's going to change your life. You're going to be a better person from reading the news. And I got my first no.
Yep.
And so I got my little trolley and I walked down the mall and I came across the hairdresser. And I'm thinking here, I've got to get a better result here because she cuts my hair. I've been going there for years. I walked in and I said, would you like to buy a newspaper? And she said, could you come back later on? I'm thinking to myself, this thing's a bloody $1. And you want me to come back later on? And so by the end of my first day, 80% of the people in the town were no longer my friends. I was like, if you're not going to buy from me, I'm not going to buy from you. And I had a lot to learn. My second boss, again, was my uncle, and he got out of the news agency business and he started a real estate office. And he said to me, he said, Danny boy, he said, your life's out of control. You're a runaway freight train, you're off the tracks, and you got to get your stuff together. I was 19. I thought, gee whiz. And he said, you should come on and work with me in real estate. And so once I started in real estate, he gave me a better sales training. He actually sat me down and he said, this is a home seller. These are the reasons why they buy. This is a home buyer. These are the reasons why they buy. And this is our competition. So I decided to learn a lot from my uncle, and he was very successful. I went on to start my own clothing businesses. So I used to come around Bendigo, Ballarat, the big river areas in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia. I used to sell my own product. I ended up having my clothing brand in 50 shops across the country.
Nice.
My family also had a pawn shop,
Okay.
not the rude one, the other one, and we were there for 17 years. So there's so many experiences in business, and the one thing that was common was it was all to do with selling, and that was a major component. And we knew as a family we had to sell to survive.
Yeah,
that's what we had to do. And so it's just evolved in many different ways, like an octopus with its 8 different legs, selling many different things.
And so what I'd love to ask you this question, selling to survive. And I firmly believe that selling is the ultimate form of service, that we all sell to some degree. Some of us have salesperson in our title. Some of us just sell ideas, but we're always influencing it and we're always solving problems. When you think of sales, what's the first thing that comes to your mind in relation to sales?
I wrote a book, and it said on the front cover, without sales, business fails.
Yeah. There you go.
It. Yeah. That's it. You can have the cure for cancer, but if you can't sell the idea, you'll never save a life.
Mm.
And for a lot of people, sales has become a dirty word. I remember I worked with a client. She was very well educated. She was an engineer. She had a degree. And her father used to say at the dinner table, we're educated people. We don't sell. And so when she started her business, talking about limiting beliefs, she was full of them because she had a product that could change people's lives. But within herself, there were so many rules that selling was bad, selling was evil. Sales people will rip you off. They'll sell you snake oil. They'll sell their grandmother to anybody. And so it comes back to you've got to sell to survive. And without sales, business fails at every single stage of the journey. You can see it with Apple. If they put a product out and it doesn't sell, that line of products totally disappears. Yeah. Goes straight to the graveyard.
Absolutely.
So you've got to sell.
Absolutely. Cafes, same thing. And we just before we pressed record, we were talking about Melbourne and how locked down it was. And there are people that are starting to go back into the city, but there's a lot of cafes, restaurants, people that rely on foot traffic in the city. They're the same. They've got to sell. They've got to try and create some form of attraction strategy to get people in so that they can actually provide a service so they can thrive in their business. And it's not easy. And the reason I ask that is that when I talk to a lot of even people in sales, I ask that question. It's interesting the different type of responses that they have. And there's a common theme that I've found, I'd be interested in yours as well, that a lot of people, even though they're in sales, they don't necessarily like to be sold to, but they like to buy.
Yep. Well, I think what I've learned over the years is that we've become incredibly intelligent, and you're an LP trained, I'm an LP trained, and we play with semantics all the time.
Yeah.
And people say, I'm not a salesman, I'm a serviceman. Look, at the end of the day, it's selling. Yeah. You're encouraging somebody or you're persuading somebody to take action. It's a form of communication, and Ryan Tuckwood said the same thing on your podcast. If we want to talk about selling, selling is just really sexy communication.
Yeah.
But there's nothing new under the sun. When we were in the pawnbroking business, I think the local police told me, they said, Daniel, the oldest 2 professions in the world are money lending and prostitution. And both of you are in this town. We're always selling something.
We are.
We're always selling something. I sold my wife on the idea to go on a first date. I sold my wife on the idea to go on a second date. I
Yeah.
sold her on the idea to get married to me. She sold me on the idea to give her 2 children, and we both bought from each other.
And here you are today, thriving. It's all good.
Yeah, but I forgot the question. What was the question? We didn't do Milton model patterns then, did we?
Did a bit of Milton. It's the process of, what do you think about selling? Well, how do you approach sales? And you said you wrote a book, which is awesome. If you don't sell, you fail. But it's because I want to talk about emotional intelligence and some of the limiting beliefs that people might have, particularly if they're a corporate salesperson, or in fact, if they're a business person listening to this, and what sort of limitations do they place on themselves based on previous experience, based on a well-meaning father or uncle or what have you. Because we need to get rid of those, because in many cases it's stopping us from progressing.
Well, the first question, the selling and the buying process, how buyers buy is different to how sellers sell.
Yeah.
And sales approach buyers with sales in mind. But it boils down, in my opinion, to 4 things. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to build rapport.
Yeah.
And without rapport, you can't do a needs analysis. So once you've got rapport with the person, you can then ask questions, because if we think about it, are you going to tell me how much your business is making? Are you going to tell me how many sales you're losing if you know nothing about me? If you don't like me, if you don't trust me, are you going to tell me anything? No. We have to create, and this is from an emotional intelligence perspective, we have to create what's called an unconditional positive regard. Now, an unconditional positive regard is a state in psychology. It's where you're sitting in front of the therapist and you're revealing all of your life's fears, wants, needs, ambitions, hopes, and desires.
Yeah.
And what the psychologist does is the psychologist makes a safe environment where there's no judgment, where there's no criticism.
Yeah.
So if we're selling with emotional intelligence, as the salespeople, we have to create an unconditional positive regard. And I know that as a business coach, because once people sit down in front of the business coach, they've got to pull back the curtains.
Yeah.
You're going to see the truth of the business. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to let you in. So that's the first step.
Yeah.
The second step is asking needs-based questions. And we have to find if there's an opportunity for the customer to succeed by using our product and service. If we can't help them, there's no need. If there's no want, there's no need. If there's no desire, there's no need. But the only way we get there is by asking really meaningful questions. And there's no one-size-fits-all question system. What used to work at the pawn shop was very different to what worked on the airline when I was selling duty-free.
Yeah.
If there is a need, then we continue in the relationship. Once we discover needs, then we can present solutions. And if we go back to having ethics in selling, Ryan Tuckwood, selling with integrity, selling honestly, what we have to be able to do is we have to be able to do an examination, a diagnosis, and then offer a prescription. Because in medicine, if you offer a prescription before diagnosis, that's malpractice.
Yes.
So if we apply the same thing, the buyer already knows whatever you're going to suggest is going to be beneficial for us both. Now, once we do that, then we earn the right to ask for the order.
Yeah.
And so that's how I view sales. Build rapport, do a needs analysis, present solutions, and if you earn the right, then close sale. And that's how I like to follow the sales process. And if we understand that, how buyers buy and they like to go through that sequence, then what we do is we have the flexibility to adapt, adjust, and respond. And we give them what they want.
Yeah.
So that's how I would sell with emotional intelligence. And that tends to be what's worked for me for many years.
Nice. It's interesting. I've got a few clients that are in business to business sales, and even some of the guys that are really experienced still have this trepidation when it comes to asking for the sale. There's almost like, excuse me, they expect it through osmosis because we've wowed them with our product features and benefits. The natural consequence will be they'll just fall over themselves to to want the product or want the service and ask for that. What they realize is very rarely do they do that. they've got to, they've got to be asked.
Yeah, I had a great line many years ago, but I just wasn't emotionally aware of how it made people feel. I would go to networking events and I'd say to people, hello, my name is Daniel. You know that feeling that you get where you don't know where your next sale is coming from and if you're going to have enough money to survive?
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem I solve. And it gets the emotions going. It hits the emotional core, but who wants to admit to that?
Yeah.
Who wants to admit to it? And I had a guy in Sydney. I was doing a NLP event and we were talking about these things and he stood up in the middle of the training and he said, Daniel, is this Alcoholics Anonymous? Do I really have to admit to that? I said, okay. And then I had another gentleman during the pandemic and we were talking about business and he wanted to join my program and it was about $6,000 to join. And he said, Daniel, if I join your program, then I have to admit that my business is not where I want it to be. And he said, I just can't admit that.
Yeah.
And so when we're selling with emotional intelligence, we've got to be able to think, as we communicate, how does it make the other person feel? Yes, we might hit an emotional hot button, but are they going to respond positively or negatively?
Yeah.
And so we've got to be very mindful of how we sell, especially to business people. When we were in the pawnbroking business, we sold business to consumer.
Yeah.
When I tried to use those tactics from business to business, they didn't work. So there's a lot to learn about business to consumer and business to business selling. And it comes down to a lot, in my opinion, based on personality types as well. Some work better in those environments, some don't work so well.
Yeah. And that means, I mean, I'd love to get you to talk about 5 pillars of emotional intelligence, because one of the key things around being good at sales is to be able to know your audience, but also be able to flex your style based on the way that the person's communicating and paying attention. So as Daniel Goleman talks about, being socially intelligent and socially aware, it's not easy because a lot of people are so caught up in their own products and services, their own head, they're not necessarily paying attention to what's in front of them and therefore potentially missing opportunities. So it's a great skill set to develop, and I believe emotional intelligence is a skill set that you can develop. Love your thoughts on that, and particularly what are the key things? Because there'll be people listening to this that say, "Yeah, I'm emotionally intelligent," but if you ask them to describe emotional intelligence, they'll have lots of different varieties of definitions. So love your take on all this and the work that you do in this space to help people, not just salespeople, sales leaders, but also business people, on to really build this EQ muscle to the point where you can become a better leader in 90 seconds.
You can. Well, I think the first thing that we've got to remember is that, yes, sales is a competition, but EQ is not. Yeah. It's not about saying my EQ is bigger than yours, because your EQ is dynamic and it's fluid. And there's times that emotional intelligence works for you and works against you. I was working with a salesman in Melbourne. I started to measure his levels of emotional intelligence back in 2017, and he had emotional intelligence levels below 75%. Now, people would say, oh, that's too low, I'd never hire him. No, you want to hire him because he's earning $600,000 a year in straight comms. Is that good?
Yeah.
And what happens is when you have a less active level of emotional intelligence, what happens is you don't listen to the emotional content that the buyer's throwing at you, especially when objections are coming up. You don't emotionalize it. And this guy had the ability just to, whenever something emotionally was, he would deflect it. He wouldn't take it on and absorb it. But people who have emotional intelligence quotients that are over 90, 95%, they actually become emotionally disabled. We call them a highly sensitive person.
Okay.
And what will happen is in NLP, I teach it at my events, we talk about matching and mirroring. Now, when we match and mirror people, we've got neurons, mirror neurons triggering in our brain. And if you're sitting in front of somebody who's depressed
Yeah.
they're anxious, they're frustrated, and you're matching and mirroring them, you'll start to feel that emotion inside of you. And if you can't regulate that, you will stop selling. You'll be like, oh my gosh, my dad died. I wouldn't want to close on him now. But the logical part of the brain saying he wouldn't be on the call if he didn't want to buy. But
That's
your
it.
emotions get in the way because you've been matching and mirroring.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is when the EQ is too high, it goes from empathy to sympathy.
Mm.
And you think you're a really nice person and you come up with all these reasons why you stop selling. But your emotional intelligence, which works for you in other areas, is now working against you. So I want everybody to keep that in mind. And it's not a competition. It's context dependent. Like in NLP, everything is context dependent. A low IQ can work for you. A low EQ can work against you.
Yeah.
But they can work together. So for a salesperson, if we think about the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence, the first pillar is what's called self-awareness. This is understanding why you think and feel the way that you do. And for anybody who wants to have a career in sales or they want to improve their sales ability, they've got to ask themselves the question, what do I like to sell? When I was in the pawn shop, I worked there because it was the family business.
Yeah.
When my parents said, would you like to take it over? I said, hell no. When I was in real estate, I liked to list properties, but I didn't like to sell properties. I don't think buyers are idiots. You know, some people would say, this is a kitchen, this is a bathroom, this is the garage. I'm like, these people are not idiots. And in real estate, for me, the selling of the service was the most important. The listing, selling the intangible, selling the invisible. That's what I really liked.
Yeah.
Selling a house, I would look at the house and I'm like, I wouldn't buy it. And if I wouldn't buy it, I couldn't sell it. But I knew that about me. But what was beautiful about the office that I worked in, you could be a listing specialist and just list. And then there was buyer specialists who could just sell.
Yeah.
So that was the perfect pairing.
Yeah.
So the first thing is you got to figure out, do you like to sell tangibles or intangibles?
Mm.
How would you know if you like to sell intangibles? If you like to buy invisible things like services, subscriptions, education, therapy, coaching, then you're probably going to be better at selling the intangibles.
Mm.
But if you're a tangible and you're a things person, like you love iPhones, you love Stanley mugs, you love 20-inch wheels on your cars, if you sell that, it'll be much easier for you because that's where your passion lies.
Yeah.
For me, I love to sell the invisible.
Yeah.
Can I sell the tangible? Yes, but I don't like it as much.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, self-awareness. The second pillar is self-regulation. And I think for anybody who's a sales leader or you've been in sales for 10 or 20 years, you know one thing about salespeople. And this was the first thing I learned. Most people get into sales because they're depressed and they get out because they're depressed. And like my uncle said to me, you're a runaway freight train. You don't know what you want in your life.
Yeah.
And so for me, I didn't know what I want and I got into sales. But I got out because I didn't like it anymore. I wasn't in love with selling that anymore. So what that means is in self-regulation, we've got to have emotional management. And I don't think there's a harder job in the world than selling. It's tough. It's not grand final day once a year. It's not the semi-finals every quarter. It's grand final day every single day. And I really feel strongly that over the past 20 years, our Australian school system has rewarded people for showing up. They've rewarded people for participation. But in selling, you don't get rewarded for participation. You don't get rewarded for showing up. You get rewarded for winning. Yeah. And in sales, either you win or you lose. Yeah. There's no beauty prize. There's no second place. It's not Monopoly. Yeah. You win, you get paid, you and your family eat. Yeah. If you come second, you don't get paid, you and your family do not eat. Yeah. And you've got to be able to manage that every single day. Yeah. You're going to feel anger. You're going to feel frustration. You're going to do your best presentation in the world. And the buyer rewards the person who had the biggest lie. And you think to yourself, why should I sell honestly? Why should I sell with integrity? They got rewarded for lying. And you got to deal with that. And it's not just something that you can leave at the door every day.
Yeah.
Because for me, I had to make 500 dials a week. And you've got to be able to carry that emotional baggage. You can't lose your way. You can't lose your mindset. So you've got to learn to get out of those mental and emotional ruts.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, you'll be one of those people who get depressed in sales and say, I can't handle the emotional roller coaster.
Yeah. And it's not for me.
Yeah. And you've got to learn not just the skill of selling, you've got to learn how to navigate the emotion. There's highs, there's lows, and you could kill it at the start of the week. My said to me, Daniel, you're going to have to make 100 dials a day. And he was really emotionally intelligent. He said, let me tell you this, son. He said, if somebody says yes to you on the very first call, which you're hoping for, he said, this is going to be the worst day of your life. And I said, why is that? He said, because then you've got to go through the pain of those 99 rejections. Yeah. He said, human nature, you want it easy. Yeah. You want the law of least resistance. You want it now. He said, pray that it comes at the end.
Yeah.
And so I was set up to sell.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, if he's my mentor, if he's making multiple six figures and that's what he thinks, I'm just going to do the same. And so I was able to regulate emotions a lot better.
Nice.
So they're the first two. The third pillar of emotional intelligence is motivation. Now, specifically for salespeople, we've got to remember that everybody's motivated. Everybody is motivated, but most people are only motivated for survival. It's the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. Yeah. Most people are motivated for food, shelter, water. And if that's what you're motivated by, you're going to have a very short career in sales. Because once you cover all the bases, once the rent's paid, once you've got a little bit of spend, that's it. You're going to turn off.
Yep.
But sales requires more. The second level of motivation is what we call extrinsic motivation. Now, based on some of the latest research into motivation, 76% of the world's top sales performers are all driven and motivated by economics.
Yeah.
You have to be the person who wants money. You've got to be the person who doesn't want to earn the minimum wage. You want to earn the maximum. You want to be able to write your own paycheck. Mm-hmm. Because in this industry, you get rewarded. The more you bring in, the more you put in your pocket.
Yeah.
76% of people. And if you're not wired like that, it doesn't matter how many affirmations, doesn't matter how many times me and Darren collapse your anchors or remove your negative emotions or removing those limiting decisions, there's DNA that you can't change.
Yeah.
And every person that I've placed in a business that doesn't have that economic driver fails in sales. Is it their fault? No, they're just wired differently.
Yeah.
So we've got to understand that. The third level of motivation is intrinsic motivation. And the money wears off. The smell of the new car wears off. The girlfriend, those early honeymoon times, that honeymoon period wears off. And you have to have something beyond that. So when you get into sales, you've got to ask, what's in it for me? What makes my heart tick? I worked for Chrysler, Jeep and Dodge, and I lived and worked in the Middle East. I wouldn't buy a Chrysler. I wouldn't buy a Jeep. I wouldn't buy a Dodge. And I quit because I looked at the product and said, I can't sell this honestly. I can't look at Darren and pitch this because I wouldn't buy the freaking thing myself. But could I sell coaching and water sports? I could, because I'd done it for 10 years and I loved it.
Yeah.
So in emotional intelligence, you got to find something that you would buy. And if you wouldn't buy it, Aussies can smell bullshit a mile away. If you're telling them how good this Land Cruiser is and you're driving a Nissan Patrol, they're going to look at you and say, this is bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
And eventually you'll go to bed at night and you'll toss and turn and the guilt and shame will catch up.
Yeah.
So find something that you're passionate about. And in selling, everything is for sale. You can sell anything. Everything's got to be sold.
Yeah.
People don't buy things. People don't wake up in the morning looking for things to buy. Buyers don't like to waste their money. We've got to go out and find people whose lives we can change with this product.
Yeah.
And then we have to be able to get enthusiastic. And my boss, he said, Daniel, it's what's called constrained enthusiasm. I said, what's constrained enthusiasm? He said, imagine taking a bottle of champagne, shaking it up, and there's a cork on top and it's about to explode, but you never release the pressure.
Yeah.
It's like those guys who have been celibate for years. They haven't released the pressure. And what happens is it all builds up. What do they call it? Kundalini rising. It's all building up. And what happens is when you have this enthusiasm, you exchange it.
Yeah.
And emotions are contagious. You've got to remember that about emotional intelligence. It's contagious. If you're excited about the product, the other person's going to get excited.
Yeah.
If it's working for you and you're getting results, they'll just say, I want what you're having.
That's it.
So they're the first three pillars.
Well, it's an interesting one you talk about motivation, because it's I often ask salespeople and sales leaders, what are they motivated by? And it's amazing how many people don't have an educated, I don't know if that's the right term, an educated response. They always give you the canned response. Oh, I want the new BMW or the Mercedes, and it's all extrinsic stuff, right? Huh?
You do not love the industry. I love people. I've looked at your disc report. You hate people.
Well, that's it. And it's interesting when you look at their results. There's a correlation between, I guess, when they really figure out where they're in their sweet spot and their results. They've found their niche. But they turn around and say, "Oh, because I need the new Mercedes, or I need this, or my boss tells me I've got to do this." It's not many people can really put their finger on what really motivates them, is what I've found.
And that's one of the things, and hopefully we get to talk about it later on, is you can walk into any room and lead anybody if you know what their blueprint is.
Yeah.
And that's what today we call it job matching. And I was job matched when I started to work in real estate. So for me, I got success, but there were so many people who failed.
Yeah.
Today, when we use science to do hiring, we can have a look at what motivates people. I can have a look at what motivates you, and I'll tell you, this is going to work for you or not.
Yeah.
And there's two things that motivate salespeople. These aren't DISC. When we talk about DISC, we talk about observable motivation.
Yeah.
We're talking about a level below that. We're talking about that intrinsic motivation. You should be motivated by money. You should be motivated on a return on time invested. You should be willing to work 12 months to get one deal and make $1 million. And you should be able to say that out loud. Like, enough with the bullshit. I've done heaps of time in real estate. And there's this canned response that recruiters tell people. When you go to a real estate agent, tell them that you love the industry. Who in their right mind is applying for this job because of the industry? Do you know what the fucking industry is? And that's the thing. Just say, I want to make a ton of money. Just say, I'm greedy. There's nothing wrong with greed. I've got a friend, and he had 10,000 people in his sales organization. And he said, you don't want the needy.
Yeah.
You want the greedy.
Yeah.
And I said, why do you want the greedy? He said, because they're going to get up early, they're going to stay late, and they always have they want to have a thirst for more.
Yeah, they're hungry.
More money, more opportunity, more bedrooms, more wheel size.
Yeah.
It's okay to be greedy. There's nothing wrong with greed.
Totally.
You want to be greedy in sales.
Totally.
You want to make more sales than your competitor. You should wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to put him out of business. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because as long as his business is surviving, you won't thrive.
Yeah.
When we're in the pawnbroking business, we had to drive the competition out of town.
Yeah.
We had to. There was not a big enough population for two pawnbroking businesses to survive. What we had to do, we had to outsell them.
Yeah.
We had to negotiate better deals. We had to be more flexible when it came to pricing. We had to value stack. We had to take a little bit less for cash, charge a little bit more on a credit card, but it took. Rick Ross, American billionaire, somebody asked him recently, why are you so successful? And he said, the reason why I'm successful is because I don't leave anything on the table.
Yeah.
He said, if I've just done $100,000 gig and the next person can't afford $100,000 gig, but they can do a $40,000 gig, I'm going to take the 40 grand.
Yeah.
Darren, we used to sell secondhand golf balls for 50 cents. We used to sell ratchet spanners and shifters for $1. And I'll tell you what, when you sell 500 of those a week, $500 in your pocket, and you do that over 17 years,
adds up.
That buys you Mercedes.
Yeah.
That puts mum and dad into retirement, and they don't have to work for 20 years.
Yeah.
Just leave nothing on the table.
Yeah. Love it.
But
which means you have to be motivated. You have to really be motivated and know why you're doing it.
Got to be good. In some of the research that we do and the work that we with people, we talk about willpower. in selling, you've got to have a lot of willpower.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to experience all of the emotions. You know, we live in a society where everybody wants to feel good. Go to social media. What do we have? Highlights. Where's the lowlights? I'll tell you what, if the lowlights would really be put on there, that thing would be flooded. How good would it be to see all the things that people screwed up on? But that's the reality. We want to feel good all the time. I want to feel happy. I want to feel excited. I want to feel motivated. Well, there's a whole other side to it. And in emotional intelligence, you have to want the ups as much as you're willing to welcome the downs.
Yeah, totally.
And, you know, my wife, I know you've got kids. My wife enjoyed the 9 months of the pregnancy, but she wanted that thing out of her by the end of the 9 months. And I said, sweetheart, if you want to enjoy these children for the next 50 or 60 years, then just enjoy that 9 months of pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've got to do that.
Absolutely.
The fourth pillar of emotional intelligence is called social awareness.
Yeah.
And this is really important, is without empathy, there are no sales. It's a fact. Without empathy, there are no sales. Because empathy is about looking at the other person and understanding why they think and feel the way that they do.
Mm.
If you don't understand your prospect's thought process, you'll never get a look in the door. Mm. If you don't understand how they feel or how they intend to feel, you'll never get in the door. You've got to become a psychologist. You've got to understand what makes people tick. And there's 7 things. If you want to know people really good, the first thing is that people are lazy. The first thing you've got to know about humans is they're lazy. Let's think about it. I have electric windows in my car.
Yeah.
I hated driving a Datsun and having to wind the windows up. I used to have a Datsun 1600 and I'd pump the clutch, and now I have an automatic car. Is laziness a bad thing? No. But also think about it from this perspective. Do you really want a salesperson, 3 different salespeople coming to your house and you explaining yourself 3 different times to 3 different strangers? Or do you just want somebody to solve the problem the first time?
You just want the problem solved.
Humans are lazy. And if you understand that,
That's
you
it.
know in their brain, they're not going to speak. They don't really want to do this 3 times. If I want to go to the doctor and pull down my pants 3 times for him to say, Daniel, we can't change that. Like, do I want to do that? No, people are lazy. Secondly, people are greedy, and people always want more. So you've got to show them how they're better off. If they can't be better off, they're never going to put the money in your hand. Mm. Thirdly, everybody's ambitious. I want the best for my family. You want the best for your family. You want the best for you. So lazy, greedy, ambitious. Humans are always selfish as well. They want the best deal for themselves. Humans are also vain. Don't make people lose face. Don't make them feel embarrassed in the sales process.
Yeah.
Humans are also impatient. When do they want it? Now. When do they really want it? Yesterday. If you say, I can deliver this product 365 days from now, I'll say that's a long time. I was buying a pack of cards, $5 on the internet, 3 days shipping time. I blew my mind. Wow. Somebody else offered it. It was $15 more expensive. They could deliver it that afternoon.
Yeah.
People value their time more than their money. They're impatient.
Yeah.
And also people are ignorant. And what's important in selling is don't put ideas in their mind that they have not considered. I know you're a master at hypnotherapy. You want to put the right things in people's mind. But if you put things into their mind they've never considered, they're going to go down a totally different direction.
Yeah.
So they're the 7 things about humans. Do that. That's social regulation. And then finally, this is where the selling really comes together. It's called social regulation. Social regulation is about leadership. It's about leading your client in the right direction. What's the true definition of leadership? The true definition of leadership is your ability to get followers.
Yeah.
And I learned that when I was 19 in real estate. My boss said to me, Daniel, the best day of your life is when the home seller looks across at you and says, Daniel, here's the keys. Take care of it. I just gained a follower. Yeah. And so it takes a lot to earn that.
It does.
You've got to communicate. You've got to persuade. You've got to be eloquent in your language. You've got to use language that they understand. Don't use language that makes you look smart. Use language that makes them look smart. And if they feel smart, they'll go, gee, I'm a smart guy. This is a good deal. So they're the 5 pillars and how it applies to sales. And it's probably the most important skill set. L'Oreal, they train their salespeople in emotional intelligence, and each of their salespeople earn about 2.5 million US dollars more per year than the salespeople who are low in emotional intelligence. That's the gap.
It is. It is. And the good thing about this is it can be learnt. It's a skill set that we can teach. Now
Nobody's born with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
And
know?
I'm conscious of time because you've got to go and pick your kids up from school.
I got 10 more minutes.
Because I did want to touch on a little bit about the hiring process and how emotional intelligence plays a big role in that. Because you mentioned before that it costs the business a stack of money by making the wrong hire. And sometimes we can, we talk about mirror neurons, and we can be alike, floating spirits that are very similar, and therefore we get along with each other in the conversation, but it may not necessarily be the best hire.
Who's your favourite footy team? Collingwood?
That's right.
Sydney Swans, sales over.
There you go.
So, the
some
first
key
thing we've got to remember when we build the sales team is a bad hire costs 5 to 7 times their annual salary. Now, how we come up with that is that on average, it takes 100 hours to fill a role. You've got to get 250 applications, and out of those 250, only 15 will be suitable. 12 of those people won't fit your culture. 3 people will. And even when you boil it down to your final person, you've only got a 50% chance of getting that person. Because don't be under the illusion, they're not just applying for your business, they're applying for another one. So it takes 100 hours. Now, if you bring that person onto your team and they quit in the next 90 days, you've lost all of that time, that energy, that input, and it's a sunk cost in the business, and you can't get it back, and you've got to start it all over again. Now, on average at the moment, it's taking in excess of 82 days in Australia to fill that position. Imagine 82 days of no sales. 82 days of lost results. You just can't get it back. So that's the first part. The second part is really for the business owner to define what they want. And a lot of business people don't know what superior performance looks like. The statistics on superior performance, if you're selling a very complex product, a high performer will outperform a low performer by more than 850%. If you pay the low performer $100,000 a year, on average, you're $140,000. If you pay an average performer $100,000, they'll generate about $240,000. But if you find that high performer, they'll bring in excess of $540,000 back in for the same amount of money. So if you just get your targeting right, like in selling the first thing, you got to pick your target. This is what we want. What are we looking for? We're looking for how people approach problems and challenges. We're looking for people, how they deal with people in contact, how they deal with the pace and the consistency in the environment. If you're a slow-moving person and you're working in the boiler room, you're not going to succeed, and it's not your fault. Somebody put you in the wrong seat on the bus. And then finally, it's how do we deal with policy and compliance? And there's some things that we sell that are highly compliant. I have a product that's in hospitals. It's highly compliant, and it takes so long to get the deal done. So you need somebody who's got a lot of patience. I don't have a lot of patience. So it's very testing, but I've got team members who can handle it. So we want to look for those things. When we're screening salespeople, we want to hire slow and fire fast. Some of these big organizations in the world, they have recruitment cycles that go for 2 to 3 years. If we go back to IBM, they would train their people for 2 years before they ever put them in front of a customer. Next, we have selection. As you said, there's a lot of bias. The latest statistics show that 89% of businesses have hiring biases. Oh, gee, I like Daniel. He's from there. I went to school there. Daniel goes for the Sydney Swans. Oh, we're on the same team. And they hire them for ridiculous reasons like that. They also show today that I think it's about 5% of companies make a hiring decision in the first 60 seconds of meeting somebody.
Wow. That's nuts.
Put that on. If you know anything about selling motor vehicles, the sales cycle can take anywhere up to 6 months.
Yeah.
But people make a decision to pay somebody $100,000 to let them in a business that they've been building for the past 20 or 30 years, and they make the decision in 60 seconds.
That's mad.
It's wild. And then if you get through that, you've got to onboard people. And most businesses do a terrible job of onboarding. My first experience, which I mentioned before, here's your newspapers, there's the door, go make sales. Like I knew within, this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
But the statistics show today that if you can nail that onboarding process, the level of commitment of the new recruit will go up by 1,800%. They'll be committed to your product, your service, your culture.
Yeah.
And then once you get them on, you've got to immediately give them a learning plan. And people who start with a learning plan from day one will be 750% more productive. So the science is there in our face that if we just follow those 6 steps, we'll have a much better chance at getting the right person. If you do that, you'll actually reduce the risk of a bad hire by 93%. Risk reduction is 93% by following that system.
That is amazing. And that all comes down through, and that's the emotional intelligence of a sales leader, looking at what is the process to get a person on board and not get sucked into the emotion of, you are a Sydney Swan supporter, so you must be a good bloke, so I'll give you a crack. Here's $100,000, go sell.
You're building a winning team.
Yeah.
You got to look at your business and say, this is Collingwood. This is the next Sydney Swans. Like, they just don't get to where they are because they let anybody play on the team. They go through the ranks. They've been grooming some of those guys since they were 12 and 14 years. Those talent scouts go out and they watch the weekend games.
They do.
And if that person's good, they ear tag them. Then they put them in the juniors, they put them in the reserves, they put them in the B grade. And only when they're convinced that this person fits the culture and is a good look for the club, then they'll put them on the team and give them a shot. And if you have a look at it, some of these Sydney Roosters players recently seen with white substance on the bench.
Yeah.
So they can bring the whole club into disrepute. And if you bring in the wrong salesperson, they could put your entire company into disrepute. You could lose your entire business from one bad hire.
That's it.
And I think we've all worked with that one person before, and we know it. You think to yourself, boss, you're going to make me work with this person? I've got to see this person. I had a business owner, and he said, see that chick on the front desk? And I said, this one? He said, yeah, she's got a shit face. I said, she's got a shit face. What's that mean? He said, I walk in here and I feel shit. And I said, who hired her? And so the point is, the person who hires them also has to fire them. So we've got to make sure we choose the right people, and you've got to do it the first time.
And I think that's a really good point, particularly the define part as well. I think a lot of sales leaders don't spend enough time defining the exact characteristics of what they're looking for that will be a fit into the culture. And as you said, you take a sporting analogy. Some of the people that get brought into a sporting organisation have been conditioned, trained, worked with, mentored, coached for years until they are ready to step up into the big time. But they've gone through a process of being vetted. Are they the right person? Do they have the right characteristics? Could we, do they pass the pub test or the beer test or the coffee test or whatever the case might be, so that we can make sure we get the right people in the right roles, moving in the right direction. And you can't afford not to do that.
There's hunters, there's farmers, and you need to find a blend. There's people who are very active, they're very confrontational. There's also peacemakers. It's not just about one size fits all. You've got to look at your product. You've got to look at where this person has to succeed in the cycle. For a lot of salespeople, they're expected to be a full cycle salesperson. They've got to be great at opening, managing, and closing. They're 3 competing personality types. I know I'm great at opening accounts and maintaining, and the killer closer in my business is my wife. And I say, Wife, you bring it to a close because that's what you do.
Yeah.
And so you've got to look at your team, and there's so many complementary characteristics. So think it through. It's the most important thing, and fully 95% of your business success will come down to your ability to hire the right people.
Yeah.
And statistically, 66% of salespeople are incorrect.
Are what? Incorrect.
Are incorrect. They're the wrong fit. 66% of all salespeople. And you think about it, if you're a business owner, you go, yeah, that makes sense. Where are they now? You got to get the right person the first time. A business, tell me, look at your P&L statement. Where do you account the cost of bad hires? Is it on there, or do you hide it? You hide it because it's so painful. I don't want to talk about that.
It's not on there. That's awesome. Hey, Daniel, I'm conscious you've got about a minute before you need to be roped out of the studio. I think we need to continue this conversation on another episode. For people who are listening to this and they want to connect and learn a little bit about what you're doing, and certainly delve in a little bit deeper into the EQ stuff we've spoken about, where's the best place for them to get a hold of you and connect?
Go to danieltolson.com, and on the top right-hand side of the web page will be a link to what's called Mind Report. And that technology there will give you a skill that you can walk into any room and lead anybody. And hopefully we get time on the next podcast, and I'll tell you more about that, because I've got your assessment here and we should unpack it.
That's called an open loop.
All parts of it.
All good, mate. Hey, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and we'll have to reconvene at another time.
We'll do it. See you soon. Thank you.
All the best, mate. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.